I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Christina DePollo. I'm Director of Digital Media at Balboa Park. Oh, you can't hear me? I'm Director of Digital Media at Balboa Park Online Collaborative. Before I moved to San Diego, where BPOC is located, I actually lived here in Seattle, Washington, and I worked at the Seattle Art Museum. So I'm so excited to welcome you to the MCN 2012 annual conference. It's our 40th anniversary of the conference, and 40 never looked better. So I want to thank you for being here. And I know it's really a lot of work to take the time out of your busy schedule and dedicate 3 or 4 days to professional development. And a lot of you have to figure out how to get here, how to get permission from your institution. Many of you have to pay your own way or travel very far to get here. And the MCN, oh, I didn't mention, I'm outgoing president of MCN. And the MCN board is very, thank you. Thank you very much. It's been actually a lot of fun being president, and it's been a really great year. And I was just saying that the board is really aware of the financial issues that we all have as far as getting to conferences and doing professional development in our community. And so we always think about it. We try to keep our registration costs low and try to keep access, make the conference very accessible. And I just want to welcome those of you who are here for the first time. I just really want to welcome you to this conference. And if you don't know anyone, please introduce yourself. It's a very welcoming community. And you know, I was on the board for 6 years, and for a couple years I really didn't know what MCN did, so I thought it might be good to tell you. So MCN is first and foremost a community of museum professionals who connect, share, and learn from doing hands-on. So I think sometimes it's hard to understand what MCN is because it's us. And we really make this organization, and the board is a nonprofit. The organization's a nonprofit, and we are a volunteer board. And the organization's been going on for 45 years to provide space for museum professionals in technology. And this is the longest-running conference of its kind. And to me, it provides a really great space to discuss glamorous emerging technologies, but also the not so glamorous issues that we face every day in our institutions. So it's a really great space for that. And I also wanted to let you know that over the last few years, the MCN Board of Directors have been working on a plan to make to increase the organization's capacity so that we can do more than just a conference. And last year we did a survey to the community asking people what they wanted, what they would like MCN to do if we provided other services. And one of the big things that came up was learning throughout the year. So I just wanted to kind of announce a new program that we're going to be launching called MCN Pro. And we're partnering with Learning Times. Do you all know about Learning Times? They are on the forefront of doing online learning in the museum and education space. So we're going to be kicking off 5 online workshops, and it starts actually December 11th with creating a video channel for your museum. And then the second workshop is February 5th, e-publishing, what you need to know. And I'm signing up for that one. And the remaining 3 is to be determined, and the board is going to work on figuring out those 3 workshops ASAP. So we have all 5 up and running, so you could take a look at them. And please go to mcnpro.org. And we're making the workshops affordable, and also they're 2.5 hours, so we want them to be really convenient so they fit into your workday. The other thing is that we hope you would tell your friends and colleagues about these workshops, because they're really meant to be for people who can't come to the conference, or maybe your coworker in another department who really wants to learn about technology but can't get to this conference. Now I'd like to introduce the board of MCN to you. The incoming president is Allegra Burnett, who is from the Museum of Modern Art. Thank you, Allegra. Our new vice president is Charlotte Sexton from the National Gallery. So we have the most amazing treasurer, Diana Folsom from LACMA. She's a very brave woman. Our secretary is Vicki Portway from the Smithsonian Natural Air and Space Museum. Vicki also heads up our marketing and social media efforts. Leo Bayate is from SF MoMA, and he is an amazing vendor and sponsor chair. Thank you, Leo. And then I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Neely from the Arts Institute of Chicago. And Coven Smith from the Denver Art Museum. So Liz and Coven are our program chairs this year, and they have put together the most amazing program with a really fabulous group of volunteers on the program committee. The Museum Unbound, Shifting Perspectives, Evolving Spaces, and Disruptive Technologies. And I really think that this program actually exemplifies what MCN is all about. So, I'd also like to introduce Ed Rodley from the Museum of Science Boston, who also really worked hard on the program committee. Unfortunately, Nate's not with us, but Nate Solis is from the Walker Art Center, and he is on our Electronic Services Committee. Then Rob Stein from the Dallas Museum of Art. Rob Stein and Rob Lansfield are heading up our Finance Committee. And then I'd like to welcome our new board members, Rosanna Flauty from Art 21. Is Rosanna here? Hi, Rosanna. Welcome. And Carolyn Royston couldn't make it, but I want to welcome her. She's from the Imperial War Museum in London. We're very happy to have her on the board. I'd also like to introduce Eric Longo, who's our executive manager. Eric, are you here? Hi, Eric. So MCN, we've been changing our business model to try to increase our capacity, and one of the decisions we made a year ago was to bring on executive manager that could help us with strategic projects, and that's what Eric's been doing, and he's been doing a wonderful job. And then I just want to give a shout out to Susan Rollick and Rob Peacock, who run the conference. They're the people in the little business closet in the corner over there, and they've been doing this conference for many years, and they do a really great job. So now you know who is on the board of MCN. Please feel free to talk to us, ask us questions about the organization, give us your feedback and comments. And the other thing is that we're really a very energetic board, and we want to get a lot done, and we have a lot of committees. So if you're interested in volunteering, you're interested in nonprofit management or some of the initiatives that we're working on, we'd love to have your help. So I just want to tell you about some of the program highlights that we have over the next 3 days, because we're trying to couple Coven and Liz. They're new kids on the block. They're trying to do a couple new things, and so I just want to encourage you all to participate in tomorrow morning's program that is going to happen from 9:30 to 12. It's an informal track of informal learning with a Slack day, an unconference track, and a maker fair. So when you look at the program, take a look at all those really great offerings during that time, because the whole idea is for you to get some hands-on experience with new technologies, new ideas that you could take back to your institution. And then the other thing I wanted to tell you about is the closing plenary, because we want to capture all the amazing, wonderful things that happens over the next 3 days, and get your ideas and on what you think is like the most interesting things that come out of this conference. So what we'd like you to do over the next couple days is to tweet the things that matter most to you that's coming out of the conference to hashtag MCN Buzz. Buzz. So what we're going to do is I just had to do that. The program committee is going to put all the top ideas on a wiki, and then at the closing plenary, we're going to have a very interactive discussion with those brave people that actually make it through to the plenary and actually come to the plenary session. We're all going to just have kind of interactive discussion on those topics. So please use hashtag MCN Buzz. So the idea is to kind of get our collective knowledge. The other thing is that with our former program chair, Nancy Proctor, we started this wonderful tradition of having games at the conference. And so high-tech games, low-tech games. So we have this fabulous assassin game, and the instructions are in your packet. So I hope you would join the Ministry of Covert Networks and play the game. And it's going to happen throughout the conference. So now here's the part where I thank everybody because, like I said, we're a volunteer organization, and to run this conference, we have a lot of volunteers who help out throughout the whole conference. So I'd like to give a shout out to Yuval Glusi, who did the Wi-Fi this year. We've been doing our own Wi-Fi for several years. Katie Velasco, who's heading up the video conferencing efforts. Our fabulous program committee, our marketing committee, Jana Hill and Marla Masunas, who've been running the scholarship and the auction committee. We gave out 11 scholarships this year. And I'd like to thank Rob Lansfield because he donated conference registration, which allowed us to give out a local scholarship to a Seattle area professional. So thank you, Rob. I now want to thank our sponsors because they really make this conference financially feasible and allow us to do all this great stuff. So I'd like to thank our presenting sponsors, Piction and MailChimp, and I'd like to thank our major sponsors, AdLib, Blackbaud, Gallery Systems, NetX, Mobile Iron. Mobile Iron is actually a sponsor with Artsy, CDW, Comcast, Exablock, John Hopkins, Masters of Art and Museum Studies, KE Software, Solago Design, Tessitura, and Collabo. Thank you very much, sponsors. I actually wanted to highlight Piction because Piction has come in at an unprecedented level of sponsorship to make the video conferencing that we're doing and the video documentation that we're doing this year possible. So a big thank you to Piction for supporting this community. I just want to let you know that the video for this conference will be up in a couple weeks online, and we'll be tweeting and posting about where to find the video. And so what's really been important to the MCN board is trying to find a way to document all the great stuff that comes here. And videos have been very expensive, so we're very excited to be able to do that this year. So, thank you. Yay. So, I lost a card. Hold on. There we go. So now I'm actually, if you bear with me, I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker today, which I'm very excited to do because he is a friend of mine. And it's the Jim Blackaby keynote speaker, which is sponsored by Tessitura. Thank you very much, Tessitura. Our speaker today is Curtis Wong. He's principal researcher at Microsoft. And I wanted to give you a few facts about Curtis and why he's such a fabulous speaker for our community. At Microsoft, he focuses on interaction, media, visualization, gaming, and storytelling. And his recent work includes Project Tuva, which was bringing the lectures of Richard Feynman, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist, available online through an innovative interactive player. He's a dedicated volunteer and has been on the boards of PBS Kids, the Barnes Foundation, and is a board of trustee at Seattle Art Museum. And he's an adjunct professor at Trinity College in Dublin, and he just came back from Trinity College. He has 35 patents, which I think is really wonderful, fascinating. Maybe he can talk about it a little bit. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about how I know Curtis. I first started working at the Seattle Art Museum in 1998. It was my first museum job, and I was hired full-time temporary to promote Leonardo Lives, the Codex Leicester, and Leonardo da Vinci's Legacy of Art and Science. It was my first ever art exhibition, and I totally fell in love with working in art museums and working on this exhibition. And Curtis was working at Corbis at the time, and he and his team created this CD-ROM, interactive CD-ROM, that augmented Leonardo da Vinci's Codex, which is this wonderful notebook on water and engineering. And the CD-ROM interactive media that Curtis created was called the Codescope. And I don't know if you know this, but Leonardo wrote backwards. So the Codescope was this great visualization of taking the notebooks, making them right side up, and translating them into modern English and into Italian. And so that was my first experience. You know, we're talking 1998 here. It was my first experience of seeing how interactive media can really bring something to life and make something accessible for everyone. And shortly after, he joined the SAM board. And throughout my tenure at SAM, working there for 13 years, Curtis always encouraged my team. We were a team of 3 that developed primarily the website and did other media projects. And sometimes he'd give us seed money for projects, and he would always support us. You know, he's this really, senior person at Microsoft and a board member, and he would always come and talk to my team. And one time he came and talked to my team and showed us his worldwide telescope project, which is using pan and zoom technology to tell the story of the universe. And also at the same time when he was showing us that project, he also showed us this interactive media website he helped create in conjunction with the PBS television series for Frontline called The Age of AIDS on the Global AIDS Pandemic. And I was totally blown away by both these projects. And after he left our little cubicle space, my 2 coworkers went back to work, and they were typing on their, typing email. And I thought, hey, wait a minute, let's talk about this. This is such beautiful work. This is the kind of work that we should be doing. This is kind of the work that I want to be doing, because all of Curtis's work tells a human story through digital media. That's really the crux. And I just want to thank Curtis for his support, and it's been really great to to know him. And now I'd like to introduce him. So welcome, Curtis Wong.
Okay. Well, thank you, Christina. Thank you for inviting me here. This is such a wonderful conference. I really feel like I feel the love in the community. And it's such an honor to be here. I think I've always kind of wanted to be a museum person and never quite got around to it. And I think you'll see some of the projects I've been working on that's all me wanting to be doing what you guys do. So we'll see. Also, I was in Trinity College the week before, and I was coming back. And so I'm kind of jet lagged. And I haven't slept very much. So there'll be moments when I may not remember what I'm talking about, so forgive me about that. I want to give a shout out to the people from V&A. I saw that costume show. It was amazing, so nice work. Since we're talking about storytelling, I'm going to tell a little bit about my story. A long time ago, about 20 some odd years ago, I used to work for a company called the Voyager Company. And we did 2 things. One was the Criterion Collection, which is sort of basically enhancing feature films, interviewing the director, putting together commentaries, all that kind of material. And I spent a lot of time with different directors and learned a lot about sort of the process of their thinking in terms of telling stories as in the form of a feature film. On the other side of the company, I also worked producing some of the first Windows multimedia CD-ROMs too. So there was these 2 sides, which at that time were quite separate. Storytelling and interactive was a lot about access to information. And so for my entire career, I've been trying to think about how you can bring those 2 things together. And so, we all know about storytelling generally kind of as a passive activity. I also drank a big cup of coffee, so I'm going to be kind of jumpy here because I need it. And interactive, and we know what those things are. But how do you bring both of those things together? Essentially, storytelling and interactivity. And so a long time ago, I started thinking about what's the information architecture of bringing together story and interaction. And I came up with this thing that has a terrible name, which is engagement, context, and reference. But when you think about the experience of engaging somebody and teaching them something new, the first thing you have to do is kind of get them to care. you know, sort of the point of the spear. And that really, to me, always starts with story. Because once you start engaging them with stories, you're giving them the reason to care. And then once you have those stories, you want to give them a place to start to explore, to build those mental models from which you can begin to populate by the information that they discover in that interaction process, thereby validating that model. And then you have, I think, a much more dimensional understanding of the topic that we're talking about. So to me, an interactive storytelling environment has really sort of manifested itself in a project I did for the Barnes Foundation back in 1995. It's something called A Passion for Art. How many people have seen that? Probably not that many. Ooh, surprisingly. So essentially with the Barnes Foundation, I created sort of a virtual museum, and that you could sort of walk through the gallery, and then behind each of the paintings, you could hear excerpts of guided tours. So normally you could take a guided tour and see the different paintings, but by walking through the gallery, you could sort of deconstruct that by sort of seeing the things you wanted. And then if you go into a particular painting, we had something called Portfolio, where you could see all the works of that artist organized chronologically, and you could pick a different painting. And when you get to that painting, if you click Gallery, it would take you back to the room and wall where you were at. So the process of exploring in this sort of virtual environment helped people develop a mental model of the gallery itself. When I was a little kid, we had a picture of Sunday in the Park on the Isle of La Grande Jatte by Seurat, and it was a little thing about this big. And I never really knew that the painting was the size of a wall. And so to me, this process of giving somebody the spatial context, connecting them with stories, and then I also have another section in that CD-ROM where I brought together all these letters and drawings and other things. But by connecting that with the information, you really get a much richer understanding of both the place and the stories of the Barnes Foundation. And I think that particular project really, I think for me, I used to get fan mail from people where they would say, you know, I've always heard about the Barnes Foundation, never bothered to go there. I went and saw the CD-ROM, and so it made me want to go there because of the stories. And when I went there, I felt like I'd been there before. And to me, that is like the goal of all of what this media is. It provides that context, that rational understanding. So when you go to a museum and you see the work of art, it's not just a jumble of pictures, but it's an informed viewing that you can really engage with on an emotional level, which is sort of the point of the art. So taking that idea of gallery exploration, I had this crazy idea back in 1997 to do something called artmuseum.net. And that was, I was thinking that, you know, great art exhibitions are kind of like where theater was before the invention of film, where all this work goes into a great exhibition. Unless you live in New York, LA, San Francisco, you don't get to see these things. And how can we sort of capture these things in a way that allows a greater audience to explore it? And so I had this idea that we created a network to recreate these exhibitions and capture them. And so the first place we did was the National Gallery of Art, Van Gogh's Van Gogh Show. I think there's some folks from NGA here, National Gallery? No, maybe not. So I'm going to show, this is really old, but so 1998, so bandwidth was really slow. So this was a crazy ambitious project, but I think it worked actually fairly well. So you're going to be looking at, this is the exact tour that was there at the National Gallery of Art. Unfortunately, there's the download time. But
1885, my dear Theo, I've tried to bring out the idea that these people eating potatoes by the light of their lamp have dug the earth with the self-same hands that they are now putting into the dish, and it thus suggests manual labor and...
So even though you're there looking at the painting, you have control of what you want to see. You can sort of pick an area and zoom in. Unfortunately, there's that. You could bring up letters and drawings and other kinds of things. At the same time, we have this little chat window. So in the 3D space, you can see the presence of other people there. They'll show up on the right, and you could sort of chat with other folks. Essentially trying to do the same thing I did, but in much more of an online way. And I think it really sort of provided an opportunity, I think, for people all over the world to be able to see an exhibition that they really couldn't be part of. But this idea of this sort of virtual tour, I think, was my first instantiation of how you might bring together this thing that I'm calling interactive video, which was this camera move through the space that was narrated, but that at any time you still had full control over what you were looking at. Okay, I'm going to put this away here. Okay, so a few years later, I wanted to sort of take this up to the next level. And in 2005, I went to our head of research and I said, I want to build the biggest telescope on the internet, which is like from all the imagery from the ground and space-based telescopes, and it'll help us understand how we work with big data. And I think he thought it was kind of crazy, but he didn't say no. And so what I wanted to do essentially was build this really big environment, but key to that environment was the ability to drive a virtual camera in this space to be able to tell stories. So in this environment, it's a tiled multi-resolution viewer, kind of like what you've seen in Virtual Earth and Google Earth, but for the sky. But also that same technology was used to represent all the highest resolution images from the Hubble, Chandra, Spitzer Space Telescopes, and others. And then it's also a rich 3D environment, which has a sense of time. I wanted it so that people could tell stories without necessarily having to know how to program. Essentially, if you can create a PowerPoint, you can create what looks like a documentary movie in this space, and you can augment it with animation, narration, graphics, et cetera. So in this environment, we also have sort of the virtual Earth, so you can start anywhere from the street level and just take it all the way to the edge of the universe. The presentation is any resolution. The Adler Planetarium has implemented this in their 80 megapixel dome, and several other museums have done that too. It'll run flat display, lots of different controls. What I'll do is I'll give you a quick demonstration. How many people have seen Worldwide Telescope? Ooh, a surprising number. Okay. I'm going to focus particularly here on the guided tour nature of it. So what you're looking at here is a trillion pixel image. It's a pixel, thank you for dimming the lights. It's a composite of thousands of images from the Palomar and its equivalent in the Southern Hemisphere tiled into one large image. And that is just the night sky in visible light. But that same view of the sky is visible across multiple spectrums. So that's that same portion of sky in hydrogen. And there's essentially 50 different wavelengths that you could sort of see the sky in. If you wanted to see some images from say, the Hubble Space Telescope and say, the Orion Nebula. Down here in the bottom right, if you can see that, if you remember the movie Powers of 10, scale and context is really important. So we show you in the globe where you're looking, which is close to the horizon, and sort of the field of view that you're looking at. But for those of you that know Orion, you remember the 3 stars in the belt of Orion. But if you go to the fuzzy patch down below and you just sort of keep zooming in, you can eventually see these things that are, oh, here's it, right here. This thing that looks like a black grain of rice is actually a solar system forming, and you're looking at this edge on, and there's a star forming in the center of it. You can see other examples of that, too, here. So that we have a number of different guided tours, and I'll click on guided tours here. There's one done by a fellow from Space Telescope who does one on the Orion Nebula. But I'll take an example here. This one is from Alyssa Goodman at Harvard.
But it's hard to see that because we're inside. Here's a spiral galaxy not far from us, about 12 million light years away, called M81. If we look at it in optical light, we see billions of stars shining together in a spiral pattern. If we look at the heat from M81 rather than the light, it looks like the false color orangey image we see here. This Spitzer Space Telescope image uses long wavelength cameras that can see heat, just like the one that took the picture of this cat. Galaxies are filled with tiny particles called dust that absorb the light from stars.
So I'm going to pause. So it feels like video, and it behaves like video, but it's not really video because you're just moving along a path in this environment. In fact, if I'm looking at this particular galaxy, I can see what the galaxy looks like from other telescopes. So here's a view from the Spitzer. Here's an infrared view. You see these little thumbnails down here with a T in it. These are other guided tours that happen to intersect either thematically or geographically with the object here. So this tour is analogous to being on a tour bus, and I'm traveling along and I see something interesting. I can stop, start to explore, or I can jump off the bus and get on another bus going somewhere else. But remember I mentioned before about this idea of story and then context. So the context of the gallery is the universe. And then below that is information. So if I wanted to pull up information, say about that galaxy from, let's see, excuse me a second here. If I want to pull up information about that galaxy from, say, Wikipedia, and I wanted to find out more about it, it would just do a little query, and there's that from Wikipedia. Or if I wanted to get, here's what I want to find out what technical paper has been written about this particular galaxy. It does a query to the Smithsonian Astrophysical Database, and there's 2,905 papers written about it. Here's the most recent one from October, talking about supermassive black holes. In fact, if I wanted to see what that black hole looked like, I could go right here, and you could see the X-ray emissions from that black hole. If I wanted to get an original source image from that, I could go and say, get me an image from the Sloan. This is a really fast connection. I don't have to know where that repository is. I don't have to know the protocols for it. If I wanted one from the DSS survey, it'll give me a raw image. Here's the original black and white feed from there. So this idea of connecting information with stories, I think, is really powerful. And that's sort of just the beginning. Let me show you just one more little thing here. So right now we're looking at the solar system, and this is a 3D model of the solar system. It's accurate to space and time. So if we were to go look at the Earth, when we knew there was going to be a solar eclipse, you could see the shadow of the moon crossing the Earth. Or if you went to the Earth where the shadow was looking up in the sky, you would see actually the sun being blocked out. But let's pull away here and find Orion. Here we go. There's Orion down there. And if we pull away from the solar system, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the constellation figures here. So you just see the stars. This bright star here is Orion. So if we pull away, you'll notice that Orion is starting to distort. It's starting to distort because the stars in Orion are at different distances from us, and you can sort of see that by motion parallax. All these little stars are positioned accurately in 3D space. These are the 200,000 stars that are nearby in the Hipparchus catalog. This are part of the Milky Way, and if I sort of keep on pulling out, you'll see us exit out to where you'll see 1 million galaxies, and each one of these galaxies is represented correctly in 3D space. Now you'll notice that each of the galaxies is slightly different. They look different color, different sizes. And the reason for that is that when they did the Sloan imagery of these 1 million galaxies, there were only 10,000 astronomers in the world. And in order to correctly classify them, it was just too much work for them to do it. So they did a crowdsource website called Galaxy Zoo, and they accomplished that task in 18 months. And the metadata for that is actually incorporated here into Worldwide Telescope so that we can look at any one of these galaxies, say 1 out of 1 million, and we can go look up the Sloan and pull up information about that one galaxy. And so here's an image of that galaxy. Here's the spectra. You can look at the redshift. You can download the data for that. You can see the chemical composition of that, and that's just sort of 1 in 1 million. Okay, so we'll return to that because Worldwide Telescope is just not just for astronomy. There are other things that you could use it for as well. I was invited to be part of it's a Mellon-funded workshop in a little place in the Gobi Desert called Dongguan, which is where there are these sacred caves. It's about 1,000 caves that are about 800 years old. And it was along the Silk Road. And they were presenting the plans for, they were showing us where the museum was going to go and sort of their aspirations for it. And one of the things they said is, we want to be able to present to the people in the visitor center sort of where the caves are, because they can't put the museum where the caves are. They're going to have to drive people there. But in the visitor center, we want to be able to show them where things are. So I thought I'd sort of start where we are, you know, bring up the Yay website, and then pull away and show you exactly where this museum is. Because this is the experience that they wanted to give to their visitors, to give them some context before they go to the caves themselves. Now this tour, like the other tours, is created just like kind of a PowerPoint, where you're creating a slide, and each slide has a starting point and ending point, and it interpolates between one place to the other, regardless of where you are in the 3D environment. You can drop in music, like I had here. You saw an image of the MCN logo. I just pasted a hyperlink URL in there, and that made it a hyperlink. They gave me these images of some of the things they were showing us, and I created this little guided tour that I showed them. It took a couple hours to do. So you can see this building is designed to look like shifting sand dunes, and they have these dome theaters that they're planning to use. So we're just calling imagery up from virtual Earth. So here's the little patch of green, which is the oasis there in the desert. And they actually happen to be a cloudy day when this imagery is taught, but there are these sand fences that are there to try and block the wind-blown sand from sort of filling up the caves, which it did about 100 years ago. So I'm going to jump ahead, which I can do. So Cave 85 is one cave where the Getty Conservation Institute has been doing some conservation. There's some background information about, you can sort of see how it's dug in there and how these sculptures that are in there, which are made out of wood and straw and plaster, and show some of the deterioration issues inside the cave. But let's go into the cave itself. So they gave me an equirectangular image of the interior of the cave, which I just imported into Worldwide Telescope. And then I laid in some narration from some flyer that they had, and just brought in another image.
A large tent the shrine was commissioned in 862 by Zai Faraday, the powerful head of the family in the Dongguan region, and completed some 5 years later. Over the centuries, however, Cave 85 has been considerably damaged. Like other caves at ground level, its floor was flooded in the past when the Dongguan.
But the whole point of this is that you're telling the story, but you want to be able to pause and interact. You want to be able to stop and look and explore things in great detail. I can sort of show you where we are in this actual tour. Here we are right there. And then you can sort of continue where you left off.
Over the centuries, however, Cave 85 has been considerably damaged. Like other caves at ground level, its floor was flooded in the past.
You can paste in documents. So I pasted in an image of the Getty Conservation Report, which then it just goes and pulls up a link to the paper itself. Let me jump ahead. They also had this condition map, which we could just sort of bring in and sort of show that. I'm jumping ahead again. That's hyperlinked. This is a video that's on their website, so it's, and I'll show you while we're here, actually. I'll show you how simple this is to author. The authoring is built into the environment here. So if I just say edit tour, here's essentially how it's created. If I go back to the very sort of first slide here, let's say we pick this one. This is a master slide like in PowerPoint, so this is where I bring in the music. If I wanted to bring in a different piece of music, I could go find that somewhere. See, I think I've got music here somewhere. Here's a different piece of music. I'll take that. If I wanted to bring in a voiceover, where did I put that? Okay. Oh, I don't remember where I put that. My apologies. But here, we can just sort of preview from here, and it's a different piece of music. Here you can sort of say, did I bring that in? Oh well. It's relatively simple to do, but I must have messed up somewhere. When you saw a little bit later, like the example of the, say, this website, all it is just going to hyperlink, pasting a URL in there, and anything in there can be hyperlinked. So I'm going to quit from that. Okay. So that takes me to sort of the next project, and this one is called Rich Interactive Narratives. And maybe you can bring the lights back up now. Thank you. So Rich Interactive Narratives started with Joseph Joy, and he's here, but he's not here right now. I think he's going to be down in the... Oh, there he is. Let's wave hi to Joseph. So Joseph, a couple of years ago, started thinking about how can we take this idea of telling rich stories, cinematic sort of narratives, and combine it with interactivity? Can we make some sort of abstract environment that's not necessarily tied to astronomy? And so that's what he's been sort of working on. In fact, there's a technical paper that he's just published about that. So you'll be able to read about it, but I should sort of more show you what this is about. So rich interactive narratives allow you to bring different media types, whether they're gigapixel panoramas, maps, photosynth, pivot data, other forms of video imagery, and combine them kind of like glue with XML to be able to create these kinds of interactive experiences. So it keeps the integrity of these different resources that you're providing whole, and the XML sort of provides a glue into a player that sort of anybody can create. Well, not everybody, but if you're a programmer, you can create a player, and you can create both an authoring tool as well that can interpret this XML. And I think one of the nice things about this whole environment is that it sort of allows you going forward, you know, if it's HTML 6 or 7 or 8, that you'll be able to take the same sort of descriptive sort of cinematography language about how you bring together music and different assets and how you move the camera can be translated into these sort of future platforms. I'm going to show you some examples of some of these digital narratives. A simple example is this one with Humphrey Davy and Michael Faraday. And this one uses a series of still images.
In a vacuum, but by people working in specific historical circumstances. The story of Davy and Faraday exemplifies this unambiguously. Both Davy and Faraday came from poor backgrounds and developed an interest in science during their apprenticeships.
So if I pause and I can sort of bring up, this is essentially the storyline for the entire Rich Interactive Narrative. And when you're at a particular part of the tour, you could, if we were at this part, you could stop, you could explore. This one happens to be a relatively low-res image, but there are a variety of different assets that come into play here that you could use to stage to make these presentations. There's a different kind of tour. This is a Rich Interactive Narrative that uses something called Pivot. Have very many people seen Pivot? A few. So Pivot is a tool that's sort of like a faceted browsing filtered catalog. So this is...
Last week I was at this Bangalore bird race, and we were talking about critically endangered birds in India, and we were interested in looking up this bird called the Jordan's courser. So I fired up this application, it's called Pivot, which helps me visualize all these different kinds of endangered species. And I started looking for the bird, and I typed out the name in a search page, and we found it almost immediately. And you can see that if you click on the bird's image, you can find out that it's on the red list status, it's critically endangered, its population trend is decreasing, and it's found only in India. So what's interesting about this bird is it's endemic to this one region.
So I can pause the tour, and even though it looks like a frame of video, I can actually go and look at this, the whole thing, and play with this if I wanted to go specifically pick endangered species, and do some other selection of just vulnerable species. I could go in and look at country and pick something like United Kingdom, and it's just endangered species with the United Kingdom. But if I press play, I'm right back to where I was before. So that's one example. Another example is this chess game where it's a famous chess match, and you can sort of hear him narrating about the chess game from each move, but at any point you can sort of pause and then take over the game and play against the computer from that point forward. So, and there are a number of other ones there as well. Another rich interactive narrative that Joseph is working on right now is one with David Breashears. David Breashears has climbed Everest 5 times. He did an IMAX film called Everest, which was about sort of the time when they had a number of teams going up Everest, and there was this terrible storm. And so what David has been doing for the past few years is he created this .org called Glacier Works, because he's been photographing Everest for quite a long time. And it's been very noticeable to him about sort of the decline in the levels of the glaciers. And he wanted to be able to tell that story in a way that was both sort of cinematic and also allow people to really begin to explore some things. I'm not going to show it here on my computer, but Joseph has a demonstration of that down in the demo area. But I'll show you the opening. So what David has done is he's gone with a helicopter with a rig of, I think, about 10, I forget exactly how many, like very high resolution DSLRs, and flown in sort of these spirals because the air is so thin up there. Base camp is very, very high, but go even higher in a helicopter and essentially shoot number of terapixels of imagery, which then he's been able to use that imagery and develop a mesh model so that it'll allow us to do sort of virtual flights up into Everest. And the first look at this was something that was done by X-Res. You can sort of take a look at what that feels like. But the one thing that doesn't come out from this, it's really amazing footage to see, but what's amazing is really the scale of this, because things that look like a grain of sand here are things that are bigger than this room, which is kind of hard to imagine until you really see that. And I think when you see the interactive narrative that the work in progress that's downstairs, you'll begin to sort of see examples of that. So these are just some screen grabs from the digital narrative that I've set up here. One example is here. You can see sort of this river of ice, and that's that point. And then if you keep going down, you can see that, they are about the size of a grain of sand when you're up there. I have a couple of video clips that I can show you about what the experience is like.
Using this beautiful topo map, we can see the positions where we place the cameras to get our gigapixel images. And from these positions, we can move around and examine the glaciers and Mount Everest from many different angles, which really enhances our understanding of the topography and the terrain. By clicking on one of the icons, we can move into the gigapixel image itself, which here we are several hundred feet above the summit of Kalapatar, a peak at the base.
So you notice that as soon as he started touching, the narration stopped, but the music kept going during the interaction. And then he can just press play and sort of pick up right where he left off last time, or drill in deeper on a different interactive. So this one here is doing some comparison between imagery from about 50 years ago.
This earlier image, which is here behind the contemporary image, and moving it back and forth and paying particular attention to the big cliff face that emerges. Middle. We can see that the glacier has retreated and melted considerably from the year 1952 to when our image was taken in 2009.
I'm going to show a little bit of this other video, which gives you a little bit of a sense of the authoring process. So it looks a little bit like iMovie or Movie Maker on the PC. There are assets on the left. There's a timeline down below where you can layer in different narratives and assets. And so there's a sort of familiar timeline here. It shows you where you're at.
And Mount Everest from many different angles.
Down below in blue are the different soundtracks, music.
Topography and
So it's very much sort of a what you see is what you get interaction model. So so Donald Brinkman here is our program manager of digital heritage. And Donald is up here in the front. Say, wave hi, Donald. So Donald's going to be manning the booth down there for quite a bit. One of Donald's projects was the AIDS quilt, and he did an HD view of the AIDS quilt on a Surface table, and this was brought on the mall. You know, the AIDS quilt, I think, is bigger than the mall now, so there's no real easy way to show it. Yeah, how many acres? 23 acres. It's massive. But here, you know, this is, you can start to browse that. But you can imagine something like this coupled with a rich interactive narrative as a way for a lot of people to be able to tell those stories and be able to connect directly with a particular part of that quilt. There's a link here for that if you want to take a look at that. So Donald is also managing a relationship with Brown University. And Brown University's Andy Van Dam has sort of been a professor of computer science he basically started the computer science department at at Brown University, I think in the 60s. And anybody who's done anything in computer graphics, a lot of people at Pixar, you name it, have all had Andy as students. And so Andy has really been interested in how he can use some of the graphics and technology in the museum space. So one of his projects has been around this project called TAG, which stands for Touch Art Gallery. And here's a little bit of nutshell information about it. The design goal was to try and create something that was really easy to author and use, to be able to create guided tours on this little Surface tablet that you could learn in an hour. And he's using a JavaScript version, open source, of Deep Zoom technology, so you can store all your imagery in the cloud and have performance that's very much like as if it were local on a device. You can do search, browse, faceted browsing, and do interactive annotation. And it uses the RIN presentation player for the playback side. So I'll play you a little video about that, but there's a real demonstration that Donna will be doing down in the demo area.
Designed for museums to show digitized artworks, especially pieces that cannot be exhibited physically due to their size, fragility, or other limitations. In this demo, we will first show what a walk-up user with only knowledge of using touch-based smartphones can do in tag kiosk mode, and then move on to the authoring side to show you how a museum curator creates content. The visitor first sees a list of exhibitions. Selecting the exhibition brings up a brief description and the option to explore this exhibition. We are now in the catalog viewer. The bottom portion of the screen contains the catalog itself with artwork thumbnails. top half of the string shows the distribution of artworks in this exhibition over time. You can also see the distributions of artist or title by tapping their respective labels. Note that the catalog sorts automatically based on the displayed information. The catalog viewer also comes with keyword search and functionality to help the visitor narrow down the targeted artwork. For example, we want to search for all the artworks that's created in 2008. And here we are.
So there's a lot of dedicated graduate students that are working on this project.
As well as a larger scrolling thumbnail of the whole piece. Here we're seeing the full thumbnail of the 270-foot-long Garibaldi panorama, depicting in 64 separate frames the life and deeds of the Italian national hero Garibaldi. Tapping this expand icon brings up to the artwork mode, the core of TAG. It allows user to thoroughly explore a piece of art. Using Microsoft's Deep Zoom technology ported to JavaScript, we can easily display an image in any resolution and size in full detail, including this 40 GB scan of the original Garibaldi panorama, streamed in real time from the cloud. In the sidebar to the left, the user can see basic information about the current artwork, as well as a curated location history of the piece. For example, where and when it's created, exhibited, or purchased. An important feature of the artwork mode centers around hotspots. These hotspots contain additional information about a specific portion of the piece. User can also pull up associated assets picked beforehand by a curator. These can be positioned wherever the user wants and scaled to desired size. Split screen, especially useful on large interactive whiteboards, allows two users to work side by side independently, or one or more users to view different views of the same artwork at the same time. Exiting the split screen mode is as simple as closing one of the two sides. And finally, user can go back to catalog or exhibition page to explore another artwork by tapping the back button at the corner.
Tours guide visitors through the collection of artworks and associated media with Ken Burns-style interactive videos, built on top of the interactive media player provided by the Rich Interactive Narratives project at Microsoft Research. Here's an example tour featuring the Garibaldi panoramas.
The moving panorama depicting the life and times of Garibaldi is an example of the use of a popular subject for commercial entertainment. In 1860, the year in which the panorama was produced, Giuseppe Garibaldi was the man of the moment. His portrait.
At any point, the visitor only needs to touch an artwork to immediately begin examining it in full detail. When the visitor wants to resume the tour, they just tap play, and the tour picks up right where it left off.
As well as his achievements at unifying Italy, graced the pages of the illustrated newspapers.
Now, on to the authoring side of TAG. First, content authoring gives curators full control over the artworks, exhibitions, and tours on display, as well as the metadata, style, and branding of the entire application. Despite the amount of customization available, the interface is still simple to learn and easy to use. The tour authoring editor borrows many ideas from traditional video and audio editors, but aims to make tour creation as simple as possible. Even curators with no prior media editing experience can be creating interactive tours in an hour or less. Editing takes place in the timeline, which displays the progression of the tour across time. The timeline can be navigated using simple drag gestures and zoomed using pinch zoom gestures. The timeline is vertically broken up into different tracks. Each track represents a single piece of media. Here we have two tracks, one corresponding to one of Monet's Haystacks paintings, and the other to the Garibaldi panorama. Media assets, including artworks, video, audio, annotations, and overlays, are imported into new tracks via the Add Component menu. Green blocks
indicate when a media asset will be on screen. We can see that this tour switches back and forth between the haystacks and Garibaldi, comparing and contrasting. Note that it is very easy to tell when one artwork will be on screen and when it won't. It's on during the green regions and off during the blank ones. The two boxes colored with gradients at the end of the display represent the fade in and fade out of an image. The solid center section simply indicates when the artwork is fully displayed. Adding a display is as simple as pressing and holding the track of the media you want to display at the horizontal location where you would like to display it. To move a display, drag on the solid color center. To resize, drag on one of the handles at either end of the display.
Okay, I'm going to pause. Never want to put too much video up, but you'll be able to see this at the booth that we have. So here's some other screens related to authoring and that we just saw. So the next project I'm going to talk about is ChronoZoom. So ChronoZoom started with Walter Alvarez, who's here in the picture on the right. So Walter has been teaching this class called Big History, and it's basically about teaching history from the beginning of 13 billion years ago to the present. And one of the things he was trying to convey was the scale of time, and which is always a challenge when you're talking about that much time. And so one of his graduate students, Roland here, had this idea that one way to present that, maybe you could use the zooming technology in Photoshop to be able to represent those scales. But that soon turned out not to be particularly practical. They tried Flash, and that wasn't working particularly well either in their prototype. But then they had seen some of the deep zoom stuff that we had done, and we thought, well, maybe that is a technology that they could apply to this project. And Rain Johnson, who's the head of this particular project. Rain, can you stand up? Wave high. So if you have questions about ChronoZoom, you can find Rain, who will be here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and show you ChronoZoom. Have very many people seen ChronoZoom? Probably not, just a few. Okay, so ChronoZoom essentially is trying to do things very similar to what we've been doing so far about what we're talking about, interactive narratives. Here's a video from Walter. In case you didn't know, Walter Alvarez is the guy who discovered the CT boundary, which is the proof that the asteroid killed the dinosaurs. That's a little kind of trivial thing. But anyway, so here is 13 billion years. And you notice as I move my cursor around, you can sort of see a sense of time up above. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a guided tour, and this one is going to be about dinosaurs. So we'll start in sort of the near present about the discovery of dinosaurs.
Today, we're going to talk about dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are quite likely the most well-known extinct prehistoric creatures. They capture our imaginations and have a special place in our hearts. However, most people don't know how colorful and complex their history and the history of how we discover them are. Today, we explore both of those. Stories of dragons and monsters are present in almost every culture throughout history. In some cultures, this is especially significant, like the Chinese dragon. It seemed like too much of a coincidence that so many depictions look similar to meat-eating dinosaurs. Sometimes, these stories can be traced back to the discovery of some massive bones.
So inside each one of these bubbles that you'll see, there are different kinds of media objects. It might be video, it might be an HD view. But one of the wonderful things about this timeline is that you can sort of correlate across other things that happened at perhaps the same time. You know, if I'm zooming up somewhere over here, you could see a different media object. I can explore that. But if I wanted to sort of pick up where I left off, I could just press play again.
These stories can be traced back to the discovery of some massive bones or skeletons. And so it is reasonable to conclude that we've known about dinosaurs long before we knew what they were. But what are dinosaurs, and how long ago did they live? To get a sense of this, let's zoom out past all of written human history, past all of human prehistory, all the way back to the Mesozoic.
So you could see
dinosaurs have been around for 230 million years. That's 46,000 times longer than humans have known how to write.
So notice up here, up above, you can see the context of the time zone that we're looking at.
The Mesozoic is divided into three periods: the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. Dinosaurs originated in the mid-Triassic period, and back then were not as huge or as terrible as they are often depicted.
So this project, originally started with thinking about how history could be taught in the grandest scale. But I think the real opportunity is how having a common sort of temporal timeline, you can bring in humanities, the arts, and other things to look for other things that are happening around the same time and construct tours like we just showed you that are interactive and can do more interdisciplinary experiences, I think, with a framework like that. This is an open source project, and I'm going to jump to it's a collaboration between UC Berkeley, there's Roland, Moscow State University, which is doing some of the coding, Microsoft Research Connections, and the iSchool. The Outer Curve Foundation is actually managing some of the IP, and I think here we go, 80% of the code by students, 20 discipline experts around the world, and we're trying to encourage other people to be able to populate with their own material, and I think that some of the potential intersections are interesting, just like with the early worldwide telescope example that I showed you. Do I have enough time? How much time do I have there? Okay, one more thing. So I was just going to show about telling data stories over time. So this is back to Worldwide Telescope. So what we've been doing recently is bringing data into that environment to be able to look at spatial and temporal data. And I think what I'll do is I'll launch this thing here. And the wonderful thing about data visualization, it can help you, again, form a mental model of understanding about something that may be difficult to understand particularly any other way. So here what I'm doing is I'm putting, this is a view of 50,000 earthquakes over the Earth over a couple of years. And it's easy to sort of see the ring of fire. But if you're looking at the Earth and you see this stuff, it looks like this kind of random occurrence of earthquakes in the middle of the ocean, which is probably not that obvious. But if you look at the ocean floor when you're seeing it, it gets a little bit more interesting. You see a lot happening between the light areas and the dark areas. But again, most seismologists look at 2D maps of earthquakes, so this doesn't really make as much sense in that regard. But we also have depth data for earthquakes. So if I bring in the depth data into this environment, you can start to see that the earthquakes are not just in a random pattern. What you're actually seeing is a pattern of earthquakes happening along these deep subduction zones. So you're starting to see, wow, most of these earthquakes happen here. You're looking at the boundary that goes in several hundred kilometers into the Earth. You can look at other areas and start to sort of test your model about what's going on. Here's the Aleutians. And you can see that same pattern happening. In fact, let's see what's happening in Peter Samus's area. You can see the San Andreas right there. It's pretty much defining that path right down here to Gulf of California. But we can also look at that same data over time. And that's also very interesting because you can look at things like earthquakes which happen over a long duration, but then start to explore and see temporal patterns that are normally just not visible at all. So we're going to go into this area that's just north of Puerto Rico here. I'm putting all the earthquake faults on the planet, and you can see that most of these earthquakes aren't happening on faults. There's the Haiti earthquake. You can see how big it is. It's really close to the surface, which is why it was so dangerous. But here, you're at 1,000,000 times real time, you're seeing things where earthquakes are looking like lightning bolts going into the Earth. And you still have the ability to go in and drill in to see information about each one of these quakes. So I'm going to jump ahead since I don't want to take up too much more time, but most of you probably haven't seen the Japan earthquake in this way. So all the yellow is 2 years of earthquakes, and the white was the Japan earthquake. It's almost about the size of Japan. And again, it happens at that boundary in the subduction zone between the dark and the shallow. Okay, so I'm going to close that. And so my final thoughts is, all of this stuff is really about how we can bring together storytelling and rich interactivity. I think some of these ideas on guided tours work equally well, whether it's the 2-minute thing on a kiosk or something that's longer form online. Our design goals for all the things that we've been doing here are really trying to make things easy to use so that you don't have to be a programmer to do things. Common web standards in XML, such as the rich interactive narrative stuff, so that your media content that you have is reusable. It doesn't be part of a black box that you can't do anything with going forward. And everything that we've showed you is all things that are free for not-for-profit use. And you can find out more information about them at the booth downstairs. Here's emails and links to the different projects. I'll leave that up. And I just want to say thank you for having me here. I guess we have time for a couple of questions, and then I'm also going to do something with Rob afterwards, a little sort of conversation that I hope you can be part of, because I'd love to have that conversation. So anybody have a question? Okay, you're next.
My question is kind of surrounding, I see that you work on all these collaborations, and so this is kind of like a back-end kind of question. Is how do you get those together? How do they happen, and how does that sustain and kind of operate? Because I mean, I think all of us in this room are very into collaborations and everything. How does that work for you, and how does it sustain for long term?
I can speak to the Worldwide Telescope example. Is that when I first started wanting to do that project, I went to a conference of astrophysicists, and I had this crazy idea of building the universe. And a bunch of them came up to me and said, if you're going to do that, we want to help. And that's how the thing got built. And I think that the same thing has happened with, with Joseph on the rich interactive narratives for the David Breashear's project. I know David because he's next door to neighbors of David Fanning in Frontline, and David and I have worked together. So he said, how would you like to help David with this thing? And Joseph saw a terrific opportunity to start to collaborate and figure out how to make that work. I mean, I think that a lot of these projects are really about collaboration because, we don't have your knowledge of what you're trying to do. We're technologists and we don't live in the museum world day to day. So the kind of collaboration we can have can really help us form and make these tools better, like the Brown work on the tag. Tag is a good first start, but it can be so much better, I think, with your guidance. So. That's what we're sort of hoping to accomplish here. And all of these projects, the goal is, around working with not-for-profits is that it's not going to be a commercial product. It's really around developing technology that hopefully you can use. So, second question, I think, was in the back, if you don't mind yelling it out. How open are the file standards and APIs for that? One of the things that we're doing with the RIN project is we're going to build a really rich API for it. We're also, some of the stuff you saw earlier was Silverlight, but that's going to be moved to HTML5. So, Joseph, is there something else you want to say about it?
I mean, specifically about the formats, it's our intention to make that completely open.
The goal is to make it open.
For now, we will make the documentation available to partners, but that's really so that we can kind of constrain the process at this stage. But the whole idea is to make this thing this sort of like HTML, and not tied to a proper proprietary implementation.
Yeah, and if you can download this RIN paper, and you can read all about sort of how RIN works. So that's a start. Well, that was 2 questions. All right, one more, if everybody is willing to be patient.
Just wondered, can you tell me how you took the photograph of the Getty Conservation Institute cave project and turned that into a 3D seamless sort of scan?
Oh, okay. How did I take the image of the interior of the cave? So the folks at the Dunhuan Academy had been photographing the interior of the cave. It's a whole series of pictures, and they stitched it together into something called an equirectangular image. And so they gave that to me as, I think it was a 20 megabyte file, and I just imported it. If you have something much bigger, we have something called a toaster. So you take a really big image, and it goes in and slices and dices it into a pyramid file format, so that makes the performance really good, so that you can still zoom in to anything that's really big. So it was relatively straightforward, and there's an import function for that kind of thing, as well as a circular panorama. You can bring that in. I didn't show that either. But I'll spend some time at the booth, and I'll show you all those kinds of things if you like, as well as others at the booth will be there to show you any more details on any questions you might have. But thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you very much, Curtis. I just want to let you know that the keynote and conversation is going to be in the spring room after coffee break. Thank you very much and have a wonderful conference.